All right, so the properties of water. So the first and probably the most important property of water is polarity. So water is a polar molecule. A molecule is considered to be polar if it has an uneven distribution of electrons. So it doesn't have less or more electrons, they're just not balanced evenly. So more electrons are on one side of the molecule than the other. And if you look at this picture, you can see that all of the electrons are around the oxygen, and there's none on the other side of the hydrogen. So the end that has more electrons is going to have a slightly negative charge, and the side that does not have the electrons is going to have a slightly positive charge. Because remember, electrons are negatively charged and protons are positively charged. So on the top of the hydrogens, there are no electrons, but there are protons in that nucleus. So that side is going to be slightly positively charged, whereas the oxygen is going to have a slight negative charge. So when something has a slight charge, it has a magnetic attraction. So because water is polar, it's going to attract other polar molecules. Okay? So when water attracts other water molecules, they form hydrogen bonds. It's not really a bond. It's more like a weak attraction between the molecules because the positive end of the hydrogens are attracted to the negative end of the oxygens. They're pretty weak. We can easily break them apart, but they are really, really common. Water really likes to attract other water, and the only thing that hydrogen bonds occur between are water molecules. So a hydrogen bond is a bond between water and other water, not between hydrogen and oxygen inside water molecules, but a water molecule to another water molecule. And remember, the hydrogen and oxygen that bond together to make water, that is a covalent bond. Okay, they are nonmetals and they are sharing electrons. Besides hydrogen bonding, there are other properties that water has because of its polarity. So water is adhesive and cohesive. Adhesive means sticky, right? So because water is adhesive, it tends to stick to other things. So water sticks to things that are polar because of that magnetic attraction between the positive and negative ends. And then water is also cohesive, meaning water likes other water. When water attracts itself, it's called cohesion, which is hydrogen bonding. Water attracts other water all of the time, and it can create a surface film or surface tension where the surface of water is slightly strong. Usually small bugs and stuff can walk on the water surface because of this. If you look at this picture, it shows these water molecules holding hands because they do want to attract each other, but they also attract other things. So if you're driving down the road and it starts raining, the water droplets will run down your windshield, right? If a water droplet is running down your windshield, it's sticking to the windshield. That's adhesion. If one water droplet is running and it connects to another, they usually stick together and run together. That's cohesion. So remember, water likes other things, adhesion, and water likes itself is cohesion. So what makes water so special and essential for life? Well, life on Earth began in water about 3 billion years ago. So life started in water. Okay, we are still completely tied to water. Everything living requires water. Okay, in order to get oxygen from plants, the plants need water. Our body is 70 to 95% water. So there are tons of things that live solely in water, and if they didn't have it, they would die. So the abundance of water on our planet is the main reason why our planet is habitable. There are planets like Mercury, Mars. Well, Mercury is really hot, but Venus, Mars, they don't have water like we do, so it can't sustain life the way Earth can. And the polarity of water and the hydrogen bonding explains the majority of the life-supporting properties of water. That's why water is the most important liquid to our bodies and not something else. It's because of the polarity and the properties that come from it being polar. So, you know that water is cohesive. Water likes water. Why is this important to sustaining life? Well, one major thing that cohesion can do is it can allow plants and trees to get water and nutrients from its roots all the way up. So water will stick to the next water molecule, and then another water molecule will kind of slide up those, and the next one will slide up those and continue all the way up. So this is how plants absorb water from their roots, and it gets all the way up the plant, just not the roots. So trees and plants are really, really dependent on cohesion to get water from the roots all the way to their leaves. Surface tension is also really, really important to keep things from breaking the surface of water. So like I said before, bugs can walk on it. That sustains life for a lot of animals. One of the best properties of water is its ability to resist heat so well. So because the hydrogen bonding and the polarity, water is very resistant to temperature changes. So this is called a high specific heat or a high thermal stability. So if the temperature outside changes by 10 degrees, the water doesn't change by 10 degrees. It takes a lot more heat to heat that water up. If we got an 80-degree day, and then the next day we had a 100-degree day, that's a 20-degree temperature difference. The water doesn't change like that. It would take weeks and weeks and weeks of warmer days to get the water temperature in our lakes and our oceans to increase. And that is really, really important to life, because imagine if the water increased by 20 degrees, what would happen to everything in it? We would probably have fried fish. We'd have plants that have fried. We'd probably have tons and tons of bacteria in those lakes, because bacteria love warm, moist areas. We'd probably have algae like crazy. So water can resist these changes. In human bodies, if we get a fever, our temperature might go up 1 or 2 degrees. But our whole internal body doesn't go up like that. Our cells don't increase like that. The water in our body doesn't increase like that. We can fight off infections for a good while before our temperatures start going up and up, causing problems to our organs and our cells. So water is really resistive to heat, and it can maintain its temperature independently of the outside environment around it. Another great thing about water is in its frozen state, it is way less dense than in its liquid state. So this means that frozen water is less dense than liquid water, meaning ice floats. Okay, floating ice is huge in biology. Okay, floating ice insulates bodies of water. So when it freezes over in the wintertime on these lakes, and there's a solid sheet of ice over the lake, it's actually keeping heat in. It's not letting heat come out of that water. So it's insulating the water for the life inside. So this allows the fish and the plants to survive during the frozen winter instead of freeze over. If the ice did not float, then everything would freeze solid. Here's a visual aid of why ice floats. So in liquid water, it's really easy to break these hydrogen bonds. They're broken and they can be made. Like you can run your fingers through a puddle of water and separate it, right? We can break it apart. We can push it back together. We can move it around. But when we have solid water, we can't easily pull it apart, right? You have to smash it. And still then, we're only breaking some of the bonds. A lot of it's still stuck together. We have to wait for it to melt. And then we can easily break these bonds. Okay, so the bonds, the hydrogen bonds in ice are a lot more stable. And they hold it together. They're holding the molecules apart in a better pattern. They're not so random. They're forced apart and they stay that way. That's why water expands when we freeze it. So if you look at the liquid water, the molecules are tighter together. We can push them together, we can pull them apart. In the frozen water, the hydrogen bonds maintain a very specific distance and they stay that way because they're frozen. They're stuck. They don't move. Okay? That's why water also expands when we freeze it. Water is also referred to as the universal solvent. This means that water can dissolve more things than any other liquid. So when something is dissolved in water, it is called a solution. Okay? The thing doing the dissolving is the solvent, and the thing being dissolved is the solute. So if you put sugar into water, you're making a solution of sugar water. But you're dissolving sugar in water. Sugar is the solute, and the water is the solvent. I remember which one is which because you can go into the vent. So the solute goes into the solvent. When water is the solvent, the result is an aqueous solution. Aqueous means waterish, right? Aqua means water. So an aqueous solution is anything mixed together and dissolved where water is the solvent. And lastly, we have the pH scale. So the pH scale is a scale from 0 to 14 that lets us know how acidic or basic something is. So acids and bases are opposite each other. Something is either acidic or basic or neutral. So in this scale, the lower the number, the more acidic. So anything that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are really acidic things. The higher the number, it's basic. 12, 13, 14, those are all basic. In the middle, we have the neutral zone. Water is neutral. Our bodies are really, really close to neutral. They're like 7.35, 7.45, somewhere in there. It's very tightly regulated. Understanding if something is an acid or a base is really important for life. Changes in pH can be detrimental to life. So it's really important to know where the pH is, what pH things need to survive, and things like that. And then there are these things called buffers. Buffers are things that can resist changes in pH. They can be chemicals, they can be things that are made by our bodies, things made by animals' bodies, but buffers resist changes in pH. So buffers are kind of like the safety mechanism to make sure the pH doesn't change when we eat something acidic or we put something acidic into this plant. It has buffers to keep it from changing its pH so drastically.